Maria had just finished her long day at work. She worked at a small clothing store where she often spent hours folding clothes, greeting customers with a smile, and helping them find what they needed. The day had been tiring, but she was happy because she had managed to sell a few extra items, which meant a small bonus for her paycheck. As the sun slowly began to set, she locked up her shop, waved goodbye to her co-worker, and walked down the street toward the parking lot where her car was waiting. Her car wasn't new or fancy, but it was hers. She had worked hard for months to save up enough money to buy it second-hand, and every time she walked toward it, she felt a small sense of pride. It wasn't just a vehicle to her, it was a symbol of her independence, her freedom, and the many sacrifices she had made to stand on her own 2 feet. She often remembered the first day she drove it home, her hands trembling with excitement on the steering wheel, tears of joy running down her cheeks. That evening, as Maria approached her car, she noticed the sky turning shades of pink and orange. The cool breeze brushed against her face, and she sighed, thinking about how nice it would be to finally go home, have a warm meal, and rest her tired body. But just as she reached for her car keys in her bag, she heard a sharp voice call out behind her. "Excuse me. Step away from that car." Startled, Maria turned around to see a man in a police uniform walking briskly toward her. His face looked stern, his eyes narrowed as if he had already decided something in his mind. She froze for a moment, clutching her keys in her hand, wondering why a police officer would be approaching her in such a demanding way. "Yes, officer," she asked politely, though her heart had begun to beat a little faster. "Whose car is this?" the officer asked, pointing at her vehicle. Maria blinked in surprise. "It's mine," she replied, trying to smile. "Is there a problem?" The officer stepped closer, his tone sharp. "Don't play games with me. I got a report about a stolen vehicle in this area, and you fit the description." Confusion washed over her face. "Stolen? No, sir. This is my car. I have the papers, I can show you." She quickly began searching in her bag, pulling out her ID and the car registration. But the officer's eyes were filled with doubt, as though he wasn't even interested in what she had to say. He folded his arms, looking her up and down with suspicion. Maria felt her cheeks flush with nervousness. She had never been in trouble before, never had any reason to be questioned by an officer. She was proud of living an honest life, working hard, paying her bills, and supporting herself. Now, to be accused of stealing the very car she had worked so hard to buy felt shocking and unfair. "Here," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she held out the documents. "This shows my name, and this is my car." The officer glanced at the papers but shook his head dismissively. "I don't believe you. I think you're lying. This looks suspicious." Her heart sank. "Why would I lie?" she asked softly. "I'm telling you the truth. This car belongs to me." By now, a few people passing by had slowed down to watch what was happening. A woman carrying grocery bags stopped and looked at Maria with concern. A man walking his dog lingered nearby, sensing the tension in the air. Maria could feel the eyes of strangers on her, and she wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. The officer, however, seemed unmoved. "Step away from the car," he ordered. Maria hesitated. "But, officer, I just want to go home." "Please, look again at the documents. This is my car." The officer's tone grew sharper, his voice echoing in the quiet evening. "Don't argue with me. Step away now." Maria's hands grew cold. She could feel a lump forming in her throat. She had heard stories of people being wrongly accused, of misunderstandings turning into serious problems. But she had never imagined she would find herself in such a situation. She wanted to believe that the truth would protect her, that if she stayed calm and respectful, everything would be fine. But deep inside, worry gnawed at her heart. She tried one last time, holding out her documents. "Please, sir. These papers prove I own the car. You can even call and check the records. I promise I'm not lying." The small crowd watching began to murmur among themselves. Some of them looked uneasy, whispering that the woman seemed honest, while others simply stood quietly, unsure of what to do. A teenager took out his phone and began recording, sensing that something wasn't right. Maria noticed this out of the corner of her eye, and for a moment, relief washed over her. Maybe if people saw what was happening, she wouldn't be so helpless. Maybe someone would understand her fear and confusion. But the officer's expression hardened. "Enough. I've seen this trick before. People like you always have fake papers. I know how this works." Tears stung Maria's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She didn't want to appear weak in front of the officer or the strangers watching. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "I am not lying. This car is mine. I worked very hard to buy it. Please, just listen to me." The officer shook his head and looked around as if expecting backup. The tension in the air grew heavy, and Maria could feel the stares of the onlookers piercing her. She thought of her family, of how worried they would be if they knew what was happening. She thought of all the nights she had stayed late at work, saving every coin, and how unfair it was that in just one moment, everything she had worked for was being doubted. She wanted to scream, to defend herself louder, but instead she stood frozen, clutching her documents tightly, hoping that anyone would step forward and believe her. The officer's voice boomed again, filled with accusation, while Maria's quiet pleas tried to cut through the noise. The evening sky, once calm and beautiful, now seemed heavy with tension. The world around her felt blurred, as if she were trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Maria stood near her car with her documents still in her hands. Her voice had grown softer because she was tired of repeating the same words, yet inside her heart kept racing. The officer's tone, however, grew more impatient. He no longer looked like he wanted answers, he looked like he wanted control. She could see his jaw tighten, his eyes sharp, and she understood that he wasn't listening anymore. The small group of people nearby had now grown larger. A mother with 2 children stood at a distance, holding their hands tightly as they watched. A delivery driver parked his bike and stood with folded arms, whispering to another man that this didn't look right. Maria could feel the atmosphere changing. She wasn't alone anymore, but that didn't make her feel safe just yet. It only made her more aware that she was on display, like the entire street had turned into a stage and she had been forced into the spotlight. Her voice shook as she said again, "Officer, please, please, just check my papers properly. This car belongs to me." She tried to take a small step closer to him so that he could clearly see the registration and her ID card, but he raised his hand as if to stop her in her tracks. "Stay right there," he said in a hard voice. "I don't want to hear any more excuses." Maria froze, her feet glued to the ground. She swallowed hard, wishing her words would somehow pierce the wall he had built around himself. But it seemed the more she explained, the less he wanted to listen. Then something happened that made her heart pound faster. The officer reached forward and grabbed her by the arm, pulling her away from the car door. His grip was firm, and Maria felt a sting of fear shoot through her chest. She tried to twist slightly to free herself, but his hold only tightened. "Officer, please let me go," she whispered, her voice trembling now. She tried to keep calm, but inside she was terrified. The crowd gasped. Murmurs rose quickly as people started saying things like, "Why is he holding her like that?" and "She showed him the papers already." A few phones lifted higher into the air as more bystanders began recording the scene. Maria's heart thumped louder as the officer turned her around and pressed her against the side of the car. She could feel the cold metal of the door against her chest. Her breathing grew fast and shallow, and tears stung the corners of her eyes. She had never been treated this way before, and the suddenness of it all felt crushing. "I told you," the officer barked, "you don't belong to this car. Stop lying." Her voice came out in broken words. "Please, listen to me, this car is mine. I swear." But her words were drowned out by his loud accusations. His grip moved to her shoulder and then to her neck, holding her in place. Maria felt the pressure, and her body began to tremble. She tried to cry out, but her voice barely escaped as more of a gasp. The crowd erupted in louder voices now. Some shouted, "Let her go." Others yelled, "We're recording this." The tension had spilled into outrage, and Maria could hear the sounds around her like echoes in a storm. A man pushed through the crowd, holding his phone high, and said loudly, "This is being filmed from every angle. Everyone can see what's happening." Maria felt her knees weaken, and her thoughts blurred. She wondered if she would ever get out of this. She thought of her mother's face, her father's advice to always stay calm in difficult times, and she clung to those thoughts to keep herself steady. She tried again to speak, her voice faint but desperate. "Please. I'm not lying, this car is mine." The officer didn't respond. His focus seemed to be on showing authority, not on hearing the truth. Maria's world began to spin, but then she noticed something: the crowd was no longer just whispering or recording. They were moving closer. One woman shouted, "This is wrong." Another man called out, "Check her papers." "Why aren't you checking?" The voices became like a wave, rising higher and higher, refusing to be ignored. Maria felt tears slipping down her face, but this time they weren't just from fear, they were also from the strange sense that she was not completely alone. Strangers were standing up for her. She couldn't see their faces clearly, but she could hear their voices growing louder, demanding fairness. The officer, however, kept his hold on her, and Maria felt trapped. She gasped for air, trying to stay conscious. The world around her blurred again, but one thing became crystal clear: people were not going to stay silent anymore. Suddenly, the sound of sirens cut through the chaos. Another police vehicle pulled up at the scene. The flashing lights painted the street red and blue, reflecting on the windows of nearby shops and cars. The officer holding Maria stiffened slightly, glancing toward the approaching car. Out stepped another officer, older and wearing a captain's badge. He was followed by two younger officers who looked startled as they saw the scene unfolding before them. The crowd immediately began calling out, pointing toward Maria, showing their phones and yelling about what had happened. Maria felt the grip around her loosen just slightly as the captain approached. She turned her head weakly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. To her surprise, recognition flashed across his face. "Maria?" he asked in disbelief. Her lips parted, and a faint yes escaped her. The captain's face hardened, and he looked sharply at the officer holding her. "What are you doing?" he demanded. His voice was firm, cutting through the chaos like a blade. The crowd roared louder, shouting things like, "He attacked her, and she showed her papers already." Phones were thrust forward, screens glowing with recorded proof. Maria felt herself finally released as the captain ordered the younger officers to step in. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on the car door. Her throat ached, and her hands shook, but she lifted her head with relief as the weight of fear slowly began to lift. The captain turned to Maria. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, his eyes filled with concern. She nodded faintly, though tears streamed down her face. Her voice was too weak to answer properly, but the small nod said everything. The crowd clapped and cheered as the officer who had accused her was pulled aside. Maria, though still trembling, felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had been treated unfairly, but the voices of strangers had helped her hold on until help arrived. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt a small spark of hope flicker inside her heart. Maria stood beside her car, her breathing still unsteady. The captain, who had recognized her, gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. She could feel the difference instantly. His voice was calm, respectful, and understanding, so different from the sharp, cold tone she had been enduring minutes earlier. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt as though someone was finally seeing her for who she truly was, an innocent woman who had simply wanted to go home. The officer who had held her so roughly, Officer Daniels, now stood a few steps away. His expression had shifted. Gone was the air of absolute confidence and authority he had worn just moments ago. Now, he looked uneasy, his eyes darting between the captain, the crowd, and the glowing phone screens recording his every move. The crowd itself had grown larger. Dozens of people now stood in a semicircle, speaking to each other in hushed but urgent tones. Some replayed their videos to show nearby onlookers. Others spoke loudly to ensure that the truth was being told. She showed him her papers. He didn't listen to her at all. We all saw what happened. Maria clutched her documents close to her chest, as though they were a shield. Her throat was sore, but she whispered, "Thank you," when the captain asked her again if she was okay. The captain nodded firmly and then turned his gaze to Daniels. His voice carried authority but also disappointment. "Officer Daniels," he said, "what exactly is going on here?" Daniels straightened his shoulders, as if trying to regain control of the situation. "Sir, I had reason to believe this vehicle was stolen. She matched the description, and I was only doing my duty." The captain's eyes narrowed. Doing your duty does not mean ignoring documents, ignoring explanations, and ignoring common sense. He gestured toward the crowd. "You have half this street telling me she showed you proof. And now I hear you refuse to even check properly." Daniels shifted uncomfortably. The papers could have been fake. A man from the crowd shouted, "They weren't fake. We saw them. You didn't even look properly." His voice was strong, and others quickly joined in agreement. Several people raised their phones toward the captain, offering to share the footage right there. The captain held out his hand toward Maria. "May I see your papers?" With trembling fingers, she passed them over. The captain studied them carefully. His brows softened, and then he gave a sharp nod. "These are perfectly valid. Registered under her name. There is no doubt." The crowd clapped and murmured words of support for Maria. She felt her chest loosen a little, though her hands still shook. Daniel's face reddened. He opened his mouth to speak, but the captain raised a hand, stopping him. "That's enough. You embarrassed an innocent woman, used unnecessary force, and ignored your responsibility to protect, not harm." His tone grew stern. "And there are witnesses, Officer Daniels. Plenty of them." The mention of witnesses seemed to strike Daniels like a blow. He glanced at the crowd and saw dozens of eyes locked on him, along with phones still recording every second. He tried to stand tall, but his voice faltered. I thought I was right." The captain's reply was firm. "Being wrong is one thing. Refusing to admit it and abusing someone is another. This is unacceptable." Maria looked around as the scene unfolded. For the first time, she noticed the quiet bravery in the crowd. Strangers who didn't know her had spoken up, had refused to stay silent when they saw injustice. The teenager who had been filming earlier gave her a small nod of encouragement. A woman holding grocery bags mouthed the words, "Stay strong." Maria felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were not only from fear, they were from gratitude. The captain then addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for speaking up. Your recordings and testimonies will be very important. Justice must be served." Several people cheered softly, and others raised their phones higher, promising they would share the evidence. Maria could see hope beginning to form in the air. Still, Daniels tried one last time. "Sir, please, this is being blown out of proportion. I was just doing my job." The captain turned back to him with a hard stare. Your job is to uphold the law, not to misuse it. What you did was not duty, it was misuse of power. The younger officers who had arrived with the captain stepped forward. One of them carefully guided Maria to the side, offering her a bottle of water. She took a sip, her throat still aching, but the kindness in their actions gave her strength. Meanwhile, the captain spoke into his radio, calling for immediate reporting of the incident. Daniel's face drained of color as he realized the situation was no longer under his control. The crowd began sharing their stories loudly now, telling the younger officers exactly what they saw. She showed him her ID. He accused her without reason. We all saw when he grabbed her. Maria listened, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Only a short while ago, she had felt completely powerless. But now, the truth was out in the open, supported by the voices of many. The captain looked back at Maria once more. "Don't worry," he said softly. "This will be handled. You are safe now." She managed a small, tired smile. "Thank you, sir." By now, the street lights had flickered on, casting a pale glow over the scene. What had started as a simple walk to her car had turned into a moment that shook the entire community. People who had never spoken to each other before were now united in one voice, standing for what was right. As Daniels was asked to step aside, his shoulders slumped. The power he had carried minutes earlier seemed to melt away under the weight of evidence and truth. Maria watched silently, her emotions swirling inside her. She felt fragile, yet stronger than she had ever known. That night, as she finally prepared to leave the scene with the captain's assurance that she would be contacted for follow-up, Maria realized something powerful. She had faced a storm she had never expected, but the storm had revealed something too, that truth, courage, and the support of others could light even the darkest evening. The evening that had started with confusion and fear quickly turned into something much larger than Maria had ever imagined. After the captain confirmed that her papers were valid and listened to the witnesses, Officer Daniels was taken into custody right there on the street. The crowd clapped and cheered as they saw the tables turn. Maria stood quietly, her heart still heavy but also beginning to feel a strange sense of relief. She had not been silenced. The truth was finally being seen. Within hours, the news of the incident spread quickly. The videos recorded by the bystanders began to circulate, reaching local reporters and news outlets. Maria, who had once felt invisible, now found herself at the center of attention. People she didn't know began reaching out to her, offering words of encouragement and support. Some told her she was brave, others said they were proud that she had stood tall in such a frightening situation. But the story didn't end on the street. The seriousness of what had happened demanded immediate action. Because there were so many witnesses and so much video proof, the case was brought before the court the very next morning. Maria was asked to appear as a witness. When she heard the news, her chest tightened with nerves. She had never been inside a courtroom before. The thought of standing in front of a judge and speaking about what had happened made her stomach twist. Still, she knew this was something she had to do not just for herself, but for others who might have gone through something similar. So she gathered her courage, dressed neatly, and walked into the courthouse with her documents in her bag, her hands trembling slightly. The courthouse was buzzing with reporters, lawyers, and members of the community who had heard about the case. The large wooden doors opened, and Maria stepped into a room filled with rows of benches, polished floors, and the weight of justice hanging in the air. She felt small, but when she noticed a few familiar faces from the crowd the night before, people who had come to testify on her behalf, her heart warmed. She was not alone. When Officer Daniels entered the room, escorted by 2 guards, Maria felt a rush of emotions. He no longer looked like the confident figure who had cornered her by her car. His shoulders sagged, his face pale, and his eyes avoided the crowd. The badge he had once worn with authority was now meaningless in the courtroom. Here, he was not above the law. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Papers rustled, pens clicked, and then the proceedings began. The prosecutor stood up, presenting the case clearly. An officer of the law had wrongfully accused an innocent woman, ignored her valid documents, and used unnecessary force in public. He spoke firmly, pointing to the videos that had been submitted as evidence. One by one, the witnesses were called. The teenager who had first started recording stepped forward bravely, showing the clip he had captured. The woman with the grocery bags explained what she saw and how she heard Maria pleading to be believed. The delivery driver spoke about how Daniels had ignored the documents and refused to listen. Each testimony painted the same picture: Maria was innocent, and Daniels had gone too far. Then it was Maria's turn. She walked slowly to the witness stand, her palms damp with nervous sweat. She took a deep breath, remembering the encouraging nods she had received the night before from strangers who had now become her supporters. The judge looked at her kindly, waiting for her to begin. In a quiet but steady voice, Maria explained everything. She described how she had left work that evening, how she had walked to her car with relief and pride, only to be suddenly confronted by Daniels. She spoke about how she had shown her documents again and again, only to be dismissed. Her voice trembled as she recalled the moment he had held her so harshly, but she pushed through, determined not to break. "I thought no one would believe me," she said softly, her eyes glistening with tears. "But the people who saw what happened gave me strength. Without them, I don't know what would have happened." The room grew silent, her words sinking deep into the hearts of everyone present. When Maria finished, the judge nodded solemnly, clearly moved by her courage. The prosecutor thanked her and asked her to step down. Maria returned to her seat, her heart lighter now that she had spoken her truth. The defense lawyer tried to argue that Daniels had only been doing his job and had acted out of caution. But the videos told another story. The recordings clearly showed him refusing to even glance at the documents, raising his voice unnecessarily, and handling Maria in a way that was far from professional. The defense's arguments crumbled under the weight of undeniable evidence. When the time came for the judge to speak, the courtroom held its breath. The judge looked directly at Daniels, his voice steady and firm. "As an officer of the law, you had a duty to serve and protect. Instead, you misused your authority, harmed an innocent woman, and tried to silence the truth. The evidence against you is clear, and the voices of these witnesses have confirmed it. Justice must be delivered swiftly." Maria's heart pounded as she waited. The judge's next words carried the weight of justice itself. Daniels was found guilty of misconduct, wrongful accusation, and abuse of authority. And then, in a decision that shocked many, the judge announced that the sentencing would happen immediately. The room gasped. It was rare for justice to be delivered so quickly, but the evidence had left no room for delay. Daniel's face drained of color as the judge declared his sentence. He was to be taken to prison, effective immediately. Maria felt her breath catch. She hadn't expected it to happen so soon, right before her eyes. She turned slightly and saw the people around her smiling, clapping quietly, and even shedding tears of relief. The strangers who had stood by her now celebrated justice together. Daniels was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. His once proud figure now seemed small and powerless. Maria watched him go, her emotions swirling. She didn't feel joy at seeing someone punished, but she felt peace knowing that truth had been heard and justice had been served. As the courtroom began to empty, reporters rushed to capture reactions. Some asked Maria how she felt, but she simply replied, "I'm grateful for the truth, for the people who stood by me, and for the justice that was done today." She walked out into the bright morning light, her steps steadier than the day before. The nightmare she had endured had turned into a story of courage, unity, and the power of standing up for what was right. And though her throat still ached, her heart was free. She carried herself forward with the quiet strength of someone who had faced the storm and had seen the light on the other side. After the courtroom emptied, Maria stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The day had begun with fear, anger, and confusion, and it had ended with relief, justice, and hope. As she walked down the steps of the courthouse, people approached her, offering congratulations, smiles, and even hugs. Many were strangers, but in that moment, she felt the kindness of the entire community surrounding her. For the first time since that frightening evening, Maria allowed herself to breathe deeply, letting go of the tight knot of tension that had lingered in her chest. She thought about the people who had helped her, the teenager who had recorded the video, the bystanders who had spoken up, and the friends and family who had stood by her. Their support had been her shield, their courage had strengthened her own. She realized that sometimes, the world was full of people willing to do what was right, even when it was hard. News outlets quickly picked up the story, showing the videos and interviews with Maria and the witnesses. Headlines praised her bravery and the swift justice that had followed. Many people shared her story on social media, expressing their support and admiration. Messages poured in from all over the country, some from people who had experienced similar injustices and felt inspired by her courage. Others simply expressed their relief that the truth had been seen and that justice had been served. Despite the sudden attention, Maria remained calm and grounded. She understood that while the story had captured public interest, her life was still her own to live. She returned home to her small apartment, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and relief. As she sat down on her couch, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. She had gone from being a victim of wrongdoing to being a symbol of courage and integrity. The following days were busy with follow-ups from reporters and legal authorities. Maria was invited to speak at community events and workshops about standing up for one's rights and the importance of accountability. At first, the idea of speaking in front of large groups made her nervous, but she remembered the fear she had felt the night Daniels had confronted her and how she had found her voice despite it. Now, that same voice could help others. At one of the events, Maria shared her experience with a group of young people, many of whom had never seen someone stand up to injustice in such a public way. She spoke about the fear she had felt, the uncertainty of whether anyone would believe her, and the relief that came from knowing that truth and evidence could never be silenced. The audience listened intently, and when she finished, they applauded warmly. Many came forward afterward to thank her for sharing her story. Over time, Maria also found that her experience had changed the way she looked at the world. She realized that injustice could happen anywhere, but it could also be challenged anywhere. She became more aware of the importance of speaking up, of documenting events, and of supporting those in need. Her experience had given her a sense of purpose, and she decided to dedicate some of her time to helping others navigate similar situations. Maria began volunteering at a local community center, offering guidance to people who had faced misunderstandings or wrongful accusations. She helped them understand their rights and how to present evidence, how to seek support from bystanders, and how to remain calm under pressure. She never wanted anyone else to feel the helplessness she had felt that evening. Each person she helped reminded her that her courage had ripple effects, inspiring confidence and action in others. Her friends and family were amazed at the transformation they saw in her. Where there had once been fear and uncertainty, there was now strength and determination. They encouraged her to share her story more widely, perhaps even in writing or through a documentary. Maria smiled at the idea. She didn't seek fame or recognition. She wanted to show that truth and justice could prevail, and that courage was possible even in the most intimidating circumstances. Meanwhile, the community that had witnessed her ordeal continued to celebrate the outcome. People in her neighborhood would greet her with smiles and kind words, reminding her that her actions had strengthened the sense of trust and solidarity among them. Local businesses and organizations offered support, some even inviting her to participate in public safety programs and discussions about improving accountability in law enforcement. Maria felt proud of the positive changes her experience had sparked. Life gradually returned to its normal rhythm, but Maria carried the lessons and experiences with her always. She continued her work at her regular job, but now she did so with a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. Each day reminded her that fear could be overcome, that standing up for oneself was never in vain, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, could arrive with remarkable swiftness when supported by courage and truth. Months passed, and Maria noticed a change in the atmosphere in her community. People seemed more willing to speak up when they witnessed wrongdoing, and there was a stronger emphasis on fairness and accountability. Local authorities implemented new training programs to prevent incidents like the one she had experienced, ensuring that officers would handle situations more professionally and respectfully. Maria felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her ordeal had contributed to this positive change. One evening, as Maria walked home from work, she saw a group of young people practicing self-defense techniques at a local park. She smiled, remembering how she had once felt powerless during the incident with Daniels. She approached them and offered some advice, sharing a bit of her own story and encouraging them to always be aware, to protect themselves, and to trust in their instincts. They listened respectfully, inspired by someone who had faced real danger and emerged stronger. Maria also spent more time reflecting on her own inner growth. She had discovered that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act in spite of it. She had learned that truth, when paired with persistence and support, could shine through even the darkest moments. And she had realized that the kindness of strangers, the willingness of bystanders to step forward, and the dedication of those who value justice could create a powerful force for good. As the anniversary of the incident approached, Maria decided to mark the day not with sorrow, but with a celebration of resilience and community. She organized a small gathering at the community center, inviting those who had helped her, as well as neighbors, friends, and family. They shared stories, laughed, and reflected on the lessons learned. It was a reminder that even from difficult circumstances, positive outcomes could emerge. Maria also took the opportunity to thank the people who had stood by her, the teenager who recorded the video, the witnesses who spoke up, and even the officers who had treated her case with respect and diligence after the incident. She spoke from her heart, emphasizing how much their support had meant to her and how it had changed her life forever. In the quiet moments after the gathering, Maria sat alone for a while, thinking about how far she had come. She felt a sense of peace she had never known before. The fear that had once dominated her life had been replaced by hope, strength, and a deep understanding of justice. She knew that while life could be unpredictable, she now possessed the resilience and confidence to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Through her journey, Maria had learned that courage was contagious, that honesty could prevail even against authority, and that communities could unite to protect what was right. Her story had inspired countless others and had shown that even ordinary people could make a difference when they stood up for themselves and for the truth. And so, Maria continued her life with quiet dignity and determination. She pursued her work, her volunteer efforts, and her personal growth with renewed energy. Each day, she carried the lessons of that fateful evening with her, knowing that she had faced injustice, acted with courage, and helped bring about real change. Her story became a lasting reminder that truth, courage, and community could overcome fear and wrongdoing, and that even in the darkest moments, hope could shine through. Maria's life, once marked by fear and uncertainty, was now a testament to resilience and the power of doing what is right. She walked through her days with a calm confidence, grateful for the support she had received, proud of her actions, and hopeful for the future. She knew that the world was not perfect, but she also knew that one person's courage could make a real difference. And in that knowledge, she found both peace and strength.